Hey everybody, Matt here from Wheels Through Time, working on a super fun project today. The guys from Bikes and Beards brought this ultra rare 1930s, 40s Harley Davidson WLDR 45 cubic inch engine into the shop for rebuild. So if you guys haven't caught up yet, Sean and Craig actually bought a motorcycle with this engine in it, rode it home like 600 miles or 300 miles, something like that. Jumped on the bike. Sean had never even ridden a foot clutch motorcycle before, jumped right on it. The bike hadn't run in something like 20, 30, 40 years, and actually made the ride home. It's a pretty incredible show. Check it out. It's up here in the corner if you guys get a chance. Now, the engine itself had some clattery noises. They jumped on it. It wasn't making the power it was supposed to on the ride home, so they decided to yank this thing out, bring it here to Wheels Through Time to get rebuilt. So these guys are mid-restoration on the motorcycle project, and right here at the museum, we've got this engine apart, trying to figure out what's junk and what's not. So when these guys came, dropped this thing off, we actually filmed a show also on most of the teardown of the engine, and we got pretty into it. Started to figure out some of the problems, some of the issues, some of what was good and some of what wasn't good. So here in front of me, starting with really the visual part of the engine, of course the engine case is cam, cover, and cylinders. What we're looking at here, the WLDR engine, ultra rare stuff, Harley's racing stuff from 1937, 8, 9, 40, and 41. So it's 5 years only that they made these types of engines. When these guys bought this thing, they didn't even know it was a WLDR, took it apart, got it down here. We figured out exactly what it was. So on initial teardown, we started seeing some really cool stuff. The heads had been decked for high compression, really cool. So this has been decked here lower, milled here on the top, bring it down tighter. Cylinders, big fin, ultra rare cylinders. The cases were in good shape. These are kind of stock Harley Davidson cases. Now, as you guys can see, I've got a lot of this stuff cleaned up, or at least a good start on the cleanup process. First thing, this motor came in, it was grimy as grimy gets, and we started tearing this thing down. I spent hours and hours and hours cleaning. The cases here, they've been dropped in the ultrasonic cleaner. After that, washed them up, bead blasted them. We get a better look at exactly what's going on. As you can see, the motor mounts here are like perfect. These are high wear areas on these engine cases. Down below, we've got the matching engine numbers. These are line bore numbers, and they actually stamped these into the cases when they were machining them to designate them as matched cases. So these cases left the Harley Davidson factory as a match set. Probably weren't original to this engine. They're 1943 belly numbers. Over the years, guys run these things hard. They blow them up, replace the cases, replace the cylinders. Pistons are 50 over, so these have actually been rebuilt numerous times. There's no telling really what else here left the factory on this particular engine, but it is all genuine Harley Davidson components. Like I said, I've got some of it cleaned up. We're gonna go through it today, find out what's good and what's not. One of the big things about engines like this, you know, you're dealing with 60, 70, 80-year-old stuff. Being able to diagnose issues, knowing what you're looking at when you disassemble these things, and finding the flaws in the parts make all the difference in the engine rebuild. So right in front of us here, one of the first things I noticed, the cylinders. These guys are so unobtainium rare, these cylinders are. And one of the things I noticed right off the bat is there was a crack right here from the head bolt to the outside. Oftentimes can be the kiss of death on a pair of cylinders. These are so incredibly rare. They're worth saving, doing anything you can. I had my good friend Ken actually weld this up, redeck the surface, so we're dealing with a perfect flat gasket mating surface here. Big fins, big wide gasket surface, bigger intake valve, which is really, really a cool setup. The bore was nice and clean. I think we're gonna be able to bring these to about 60 thousandths of an inch oversize. So both cylinders had that crack, which is sketchy to see. It was one of those things where it's like, you hate welding on 80-year-old cast iron, but Ken did a jam-up job. Like I said, cylinders, super rare, worth doing anything you can to save. So cases are beautiful. Like I said, the motor mounts are great. The races are nice. We've got these things basically torn down. The bushings are fantastic inside. The cam fit is great. I've got the oiler screen out there. Scavenge pumps out. Cam covers beautiful. Great parts. One of the things about this engine, whoever built it knew what they were doing, and they used top-notch parts. What wasn't good, they tossed out and really incorporated some really neat stuff. So looking over the rest of the parts, as you guys can see, I just got a few things cleaned up here. Oily, grimy valves and springs. Actually, what we've got here, intake valves are actually a little bit larger, so I don't know if you can see this or not. Exhaust valve here, intake valve here, and you've got maybe, I don't know, what's that, a 1/16 of an inch, maybe a little bit more, not quite an 1/8 of an inch, larger intake valve. So that's a pretty cool deal. The WLDR, these things like to breathe. So big intake valves, you get it in, you don't need the big exhaust valves because the gas is compressed on the way out. So progressive wound valve springs, which is really cool. This is racing stuff, didn't come this way stock. Whoever rebuilt the engine knew what they were doing. Pretty neat to see the progressive wound valve springs. Actually, this valve spring was broken, so that's good indication of why the motor wasn't running like it should. One thing about motors, you got to be able to open the valves, big cams, you got to be able to close them, good springs. So a spring like this would definitely have a big effect on how poorly the engine was running. You can see all the dirt and the grime inside of this lifter cover there that was basically from the I think it was the front cylinder fouling out pretty good. So what else are we looking at, guys? The cams, WLDR cams, super rare stuff, big intake, big exhaust. So these are big lumpy lobes here. This part is what opens the valve. As these things spin, they lift the lifters, lifters open the valves. These are monster cam lobes for the time. Let me see, I got another cam over here somewhere. Yeah, so these are apples to apples here. As far as the gear goes, and you can see that's a stock Harley-Davidson 45 lobe, not that big. Lift is maybe 375. This one here, you can see I've got the shim on there. So this is big and wide, big wide lobe there compared to this. Holds the valve open longer, opens it earlier, closes it later, makes more power. So that was the thing about the WLDR. Big difference in power from a stock Harley-Davidson 45. So we're gonna get a lot of this stuff cleaned up, drop the cams in the ultrasonic. I've cleaned a few things up. This is the oil scavenge pump. You're looking for, you know, wear inside of here, rust and pitting. This all looks perfect. I've a few of the pieces that are cleaned up. So you guys see a lot of grease and grime and dirt and grit here. Once you get these things cleaned up, they shine like new. So these are the oil pump gears for the scavenge pump. Or maybe we'll open this up a little bit, get that thing breathing a little bit better. We're gonna replace the valves, replace the springs. Lifters here, they feel absolutely perfect. These have been rebuilt, no doubt. I think we'll probably run those as is. Of course, we'll clean them up, but there's no up and down play in the roller there. It'll follow the cam perfect. All four of them feel fantastic. Lifter blocks I've got cleaned up. Of course, all this stuff here, this will get bead blasted, painted silver, just like Harley-Davidson did. Same thing with the oil pump here. Now, this is the scavenge pump, or excuse me, this is the feed pump. It's the late style feed pump, so maybe 1941 and up. Bulletproof, easily rebuildable. Check ball, feed, check ball, another check ball for the bypass there. That will get cleaned up, refinished, and will look fresh as new. The points, just awesome. You know, original Harley-Davidson points. They look great. I'm going to ask these guys what they want to do, but I would just clean these up and reuse them. But at the same time, we can put in a good set of blue streak points too. Carburetor rebuild. Crank right here is kind of one of the next things that we're moving towards. Is rebuilding the crank. I'm waiting on pistons right now. I actually had a set of new old stock Harley Davidson 20 over pistons. I just took these out of the Cosmoline. Turns out we're 50 over bore, so we can't use these pistons. I've got some more on the way. They ought to be here shortly. So when the pistons get here, I can get this crank balanced, and the crank, everything looks really nice. One of the neat things I noticed about this, I didn't even realize until like a day or two after I took it apart, it's been lightened. This counterweight down here usually is flush with the outside of the flywheel there, that outer ring. What's happened is you can see how they've relieved this ring inwards. They've thinned these flywheels out, which is really, really a cool deal there. So we do this on a lot of our race motors, lighter flywheels, quicker revs. So these things rev absolutely incredible. They make unbelievable noise. We're gonna take you guys up front right now and actually fire up one of these 1939 Harley Davidson WLDRs. You can hear what they sound like, see what they look like, then we're gonna get back here and get back to work. So in the mid-1930s, the AMA comes out with Class C racing, basically 45 cubic inch, every man's racing. And by 1937, Harley Davidson came out with a special model, the WLDR. So all the letters mean something in the Harley Davidson nomenclature. You've got W, 45 cubic inch, L, high compression, D, high performance, R, racing. So here at Wheels Through Time, the best collection of WLDRs and WR racing motorcycles anywhere in existence, period. Right here in front of us, we're looking at 37, 38, 39, first year, second year, third year examples. All of these bikes have actually been specially prepped with big Daytona racing gas tanks, 200 miles. These old motorcycles on the beach, 200 miles. So 37, 38, 39. This is the one we're going to be firing up today. Ultra special bike. Thing about it, this bike probably hasn't run in 10 years. So fingers crossed, we're going to put some gas in it, put some oil in it, kick her over and hope she fires. These gas tanks are so dang cool. What they've actually got is distributor caps from a Harley Davidson distributor. On a normal stock bike, they sit down here, covers the timer, the cap does. They've used these for, any oil in there? Nah, just a little maybe. They've used these specifically for the gas and oil caps, oil on the right side, gas on the left side. And I think the reason they did that was not to let it fill quicker, but these gas caps are prone to falling off when you get high speed, high vibration. So I believe they actually use the distributor caps and the distributor bales to hold the caps on there. So made for a big difference. So we've got we're gonna put 2 quarts in the, in the tank there. We're gonna put about a half a quart. Let me see. We'll go ahead and put 10 ounces in the transmission. Last thing you want to do is burn up a Harley Davidson 45 transmission. They're an absolute pain in the butt to rebuild. So we're gonna do what we can to keep this one well preserved. It should have a little bit of oil down in the bottom. Crazy thing about the 45 transmissions is there's actually no drain plug. So what happens is they all tend to leak out, which we always say if there's no oil underneath it, there's no oil in it. And all right, there we go. We got our 10 ounces in there. We're gonna let that drip dry and then drop the last bit of a second quart in here. We should be set to go. A little bit of fuel. Now the WLDRs make an absolutely incredible sound. It's a whole different motorcycle than your stock Harley Davidson 45. You've got those big cams, ported cylinders, better carburetor, and of course, that ultra long straight WLDR pipe. These things are incredibly raspy. This bike may or may not have some extra tricks done inside. So hopefully she fires right up. Like I said, hadn't run in probably 10 years. We're gonna see how many kicks it takes. All right. A little bit of fuel. This is one big gas tank. Compared to a stock tank, it holds quite a bit more and makes for a heck of a cool look. All right, I think we're looking solid in there. We got gas in the tank and we should be ready to go. Sean Craig, this is what your 1930s, 40s Harley Davidson WLDR ought to sound like when we get done rebuilding her. 1, 2, 3 primes and hopefully 1 to go. Thing just, it revs to the moon. This thing is just 100-mile-an-hour motorcycle all day. Cool as they get. The WLDR's one Daytona in 38, 39, 40. Just awesome stuff. So I guess we're ready to get back to work. First thing to do is get this crank torn down and really inspect the parts. We're gonna get the crank rebuilt. We can get these cases bolted back together and I can get on to building the top end. There's lots of ways to take a crank apart. The easiest way is to pop this thing in the press, pinch those flywheels right where they're at, and loosen those crank pin nuts. See, the crank pin nuts probably 125, 140 pounds is spec. Yep, those might have been a little bit loose. The other side here. We're gonna see exactly what the bearings look inside of this crank. Now, one of the neat things is the flywheels on this motor have been lightened and the rods have been polished. So whoever did the work on this engine, they knew what they were doing. And anything to make it a little bit slicker, rev a little bit faster, makes for a happier motor. Go. Everything looks good inside there. Thrust surface nice. Bearings look nice. Try and keep as many of these in as we can. So we've got beautiful pair of rods. Those rods are just awesome. Check it out, guys. You can see where they've been worked on. Usually you've got big raised casting areas there. Polishing the rod makes them a little stronger, makes them maybe retain a little bit more oil on the connecting rod, which is nice because the crank pin is the heart of your engine, and if you ain't getting lots of oil to your crank pin, you're in big trouble. Just for curiosity's sake, we're going to find out what size these bearings actually are. Might give us a better idea of how often or how many times this engine's been rebuilt. And we're looking like a little bit oily and grimy, but it looks like these bearings are 2 10,000ths of an inch oversized. So that means it's been rebuilt at least once. Yep, 2 10,000ths. Both are a couple bearings reading the same thing. So 2 10,000ths oversized. Plenty of life left in those connecting rods. The rod fit was really nice. As you guys can see, the bearings don't look worn out or rusted, pitted. The cages look nice and oiled. So we are going to replace the bearings, but it's good to see that everything in there looks really nice and fresh. So crank bearings here, connecting rods, races, beautiful. Those are going to get cleaned up. Yeah, crank pin, fantastic. Let's get a tighter look at this. It may be a reusable crank pin, and you always want to use Harley-Davidson original parts if you can. And this crank pin looks like new almost. So I think we're going to go ahead and use their original crank pin. There's no reason not to use that. That's in great shape. Like I said, thrust surfaces are beautiful. Sprocket shaft and pinion shafts, both. As long as those threads are good, we're going to use it. Sprocket shaft and pinion shaft, both fantastic. So as long as we get a nice bearing fit in there, we're going to use each of those. We'll test all that as it comes apart. Guys, thanks for tuning in with us. Bikes and Beards YouTube rebuild for the 1939 4041 WLDR racing engine. This thing's going to come back together and absolutely scream. We'll catch up with you next time.